I'm Ashumi. I'm the founder of Future Plus. We are a curated global network connecting founders, visionaries, and disruptors across creative, culture, and technology. And I'm joined today by our fantastic panelists, Carlota Rodben, who will be my co-host for today. And then we have Blake Lezenski from Outlier Ventures and Nell Lloyd-Malcolm from xyrobe. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great pleasure to be here.
So I guess we should maybe start, if you want to all just introduce yourselves, and then we can kind of dive into everything that we have planned to talk about today.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and start. Thank you so much for having me as your co-host, Ashumi. It's an absolute pleasure. I am the author of Beauty as It Is, my first book, and Beyond Luxury, the second. Maybe some of you know the Beyond Luxury podcast, which was a spinoff of the book that has Ashumi on the second season, and hopefully we'll have Nell and Blake on there soon as well, where we talk about where the future of luxury is going. Also an entrepreneur and innovation and future specialist in the luxury industry. Now I'll give it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Nell. I'm the CEO of xyrobe. I was formerly in the visual effects industry in film before I left to set up xyrobe. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Blake Lezenski, great pleasure to be here. I'm a partner program director at Outlier Ventures. We are the biggest Web3 accelerator globally. And I had the pleasure to run 5 programs personally, and I am personally responsible for acceleration of about 40 amazing startups with great founders, and very excited for the discussion today with such amazing panelists.
Great. I think we can go ahead into the section for trends and tech trends. And Blake, you are the king of this at Outlier Ventures. So we would love to see a little of, in your world, what those hot topics and trends are in the space of tech and luxury and Web3 coming together.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Carlota. You're making me blush. To talk more about the trends, maybe starting with a wider lens, I think in the years past, we have seen brands and enterprises approach Web3 technologies with curiosity. But in practice, that meant most of those activations were chiefly financed from marketing budgets. There wasn't an expectation of return of investment. The nature of those activations was somewhat scattered and maybe just exploratory. Whereas right now, I'm very happy to see that the adoption of the technologies is advancing at a less noisy, but a more mature rate. So if you follow the money, those get integrated directly into operations, into building loyalty with customers, and are becoming part of core strategy and reinventing the business models in luxury and fashion. So first of all, we see this movement from opportunistic and very noisy to moving towards more mature adoption, with maybe looking at those technologies being integrated into the backend rather than taking the front stage. And I think we enter a new era where luxury kind of has to expand its definition. And I like to think that the core pillars of that definition are community. So it's no longer about like what you can afford, what you own, but actually what community do you belong to? And I think Future Plus being an amazing example of a perfect community. And essentially, how can you engage the brand? How can you participate in the brand's story as a customer? And how you can influence the direction of the brand also through co-creation. So community technology, where do those communities live? How this interaction takes place? How do you get the data knowledge from those interactions and can segment and influence those customers, reward them for their loyalty, is one major trend that encapsulates all smaller trends that we see in the space. And the other one, inherently linked, is immersive experience. What I mean by that, in the era of omnipresent e-commerce, it's no longer about essentially transactions with the brand. I can do that from my bathtub on the phone, just order it through e-commerce. But if I am having a digital or real-world interaction with a luxury brand, I expect this to be an immersive experience, preferably one that can be shared in a social setting, so I can show my allegiance to the brand. I can show that it aligns with my values. So I think being in a community and having access to those unique experiences brings a whole set of opportunities for brands and technologies they should explore. I'm happy to dive deeper into those specific technology opportunities for brands, but I'm aware I've been hogging the mic for quite some time. So let me know if you want to circle back to it later.
I think you bring up some really valid points there, actually. And, I think this is something that, of course, is a great segue into what maybe Nell can give us a little bit more, in depth of insights about, because she's built xyrobe. And Nell, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the concept and the vision for xyrobe? And of course, we also, congratulations, because you're also LVMH's Innovation Award finalist coming up this week at VivaTech. So we're very excited to know and learn more about everything that you are envisioning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's still really surreal. Obviously, we're really thrilled by that and excited to meet everyone at VivaTech. And so xyrobe is an immersive marketing opportunity. I think that's the best way to describe us. We are in the business of creating immersive experiences primarily for in-store or physical experience, which is obviously quite a unique niche in terms of where typically people would assume a kind of immersive experience to sit. Typically it goes online or it goes for at scale use. And we've kind of targeted more of the kind of in-person opportunity that I think Blake was talking about there quite a lot, which is all about building community, utilizing retail in a way that it already does really brilliantly, but adding to that with a lot of the elements that I think previously brands had really struggled to engage or be able to utilize some of the really brilliant aspects of things like VR, projections, even AR, and creating these kinds of magical experiences that can exist in their retail stores or settings or even events and pop-up locations that don't compromise their existing kind of luxury retailing standard, which typically they may have assumed that integrating this kind of technology would. And so xyrobe are building a series of locations, destinations that can provide really phenomenal immersive experience for brands to engage with as a kind of turnkey solution with standalone destinations found in retailing spaces all around the world, which I know that we're going to touch on in a moment, but also solutions that means they can utilize it in pop-up event locations as well. So yeah, that's what we typically focus on.
What I love about this, about xyrobe, is that it's truly going towards moving from a product-centric industry to an experience-centric industry, bringing the experience to the point of sale and really allowing to bring that immersiveness and that dreamlike experience in retail. And that's absolutely a way to crack that barrier on coming to a point to dream and go beyond, not only in places that are rotating around the point of sale, but within, and creating these amazing community and immersive experiences.
Well, exactly. I think that's the whole point around retail and the innovation that we've seen over the last few years, especially since the pandemic, is that we require more from our retail experiences. We want something bigger, greater, better. And so often I think brands are left funding with a budget potentially that's come from a marketing level that doesn't mean they can play easily in these kinds of areas. And I think that was the thing that we were so kind of heavily focused on at xyrobe, is creating something that meant brands can come and play and explore this kind of area with a level of ease that potentially would have prevented them from doing so before.
And I think it's also really interesting on the retail side of things, because I think what we hear most as the biggest pain point from, those multi-brand retailers or department stores is that bringing the sort of customers through the door and sort of allowing them to engage, like also Carlota said, that it's giving them much more of an experience-led reason to be there versus just very much about the product or the sales, or making them actually feel. And that then again, I guess, also ties into what Blake said about the loyalty aspect, right? Because ultimately, all of these immersive experiential moments only lead to higher retention, much more memorable experiences, brand recall, for people to actually come back and have that loyalty last a lot longer across their whole entire customer journeys. But yeah, that's super exciting and interesting. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more in depth, because I'm very curious also to know about how you convinced all of these brands to kind of do these super exciting experiences that you have already showcased. But before we dive into that, just to kind of also talk about the some of the trends that have been on our radar over the last months. We have a newsletter at Future Plus called Future Plus Fridays. So if you haven't subscribed, definitely there's a link to subscribe on our website. So you get your weekly dose of everything at the intersection of creative, culture, and technology. We put the newsletter out on Fridays, and some of the things like that have been on our radar have been, for example, Roblox. We've had quite a lot of news with what is happening across Roblox. We all, of course, know that's where there's lots of brands are sort of entering into the gaming world. It's got a huge uptick in also engagement, and there's a lot of different brands, and they're also actually launching lots of new features, which Walmart recently, for example, was part of their beta program, which allows you to shop directly for physical products, as well as being able to now showcase advertising in game, which is also all going to just add to that whole Roblox ecosystem. So that was something really exciting. Carlota, anything else stick out from our newsletters that you want to maybe touch upon?
Yeah, I think the obvious one from this week that I think we need to touch upon is OpenAI's announcement on ChatGPT 4.0, and it's a difference in capacity of combining audio, text, and image to respond to a very much faster and more human-like way in the way that we interact with the chatbot. And this is just taking us one step closer to AGI. And also, I think we could talk about one very interesting topic that was mentioned in the past couple of issues, which are virtual influencers and the importance of virtual influencers within the spatial computing realm. And this is a topic that I spoke about with Omar Garim, which was the ex-creative director at Meta, and now is doing incredible things. And his podcast is actually coming out this week, and he really talks about the force of AI-driven and virtual influencers in the world of luxury, and what kind of virtual identities and digital identities this could also bring to the luxury space, having influencers that maybe don't have anyone behind them but AI. So that's a very interesting one that if you want to hear more about on the Beyond Luxury podcast this week. And without further ado, I think we can talk about one more topic, that is xyrobe doing a very interesting collaboration with Harrods. And that we can kind of segue into a little discussion with you, Nell. Now that honestly, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I remember very well 2 years ago when we met, when I was still at Chanel, and you did your Chanel Roadshow, as we were speaking about before. And seeing this experience and how it's evolved is just absolutely incredible. and you are doing so many amazing things, as one of them being one of the 18 finalists in LVMH Awards for immersive digital experiences. So truly, what an honor to be there this week in Paris for VivaTech. And we would love to jump into what immersive media and ads mean to you, as talking about xyrobe and what you do in this storytelling experience.
Yeah, thank you. I think that often when people think about integrating VR or anything that would probably be deemed as immersive, as I've just touched on there, I think that the immediate assumption is that you kind of need to potentially overcomplicate things a lot. Think about interactivity, personalization. You know, there's a lot of added benefits when you're dealing with VR and things like that. I think that we at xyrobe took a particular focus on looking at how the customer of all of these brands that are looking to integrate this, how they are looking to experience what we're trying to do in VR, and what the benefits are of that in particular when it comes to in-store experience. Because for us, I think immersive media and advertising, virtual reality offers just a great storytelling tool for existing media types. I think that often the assumption is that you have to rethink completely how you're going to generate content. And whilst there are technical things that you definitely need to think about with how you storytell in VR, the message is still the same. The advertising is still the same opportunity, but it's just greater because you're immersing someone in it completely. And so often the conversations I'm having with brands is about how they can see this kind of content being just a further extension of existing creatives or advertising or marketing plans that they've already got in place. And it's just then about how we distribute it naturally across their existing customer, and how does that look? And so that's really where I think we're interested in, and we try to simplify it as much as possible when we're considering what xyrobe is bringing to the market and how we can deliver a really amazing experience for a customer. So a brand can start engaging with this kind of media that is so compelling in a way that doesn't alienate people or doesn't overcomplicate what we're ultimately trying to achieve, which is really fantastic experience. And you know, 9 times out of 10, a luxury customer's never really engaged with VR before in a way that they would be comfortable operating controllers or learning how to create personalization in this kind of content. And so really where our focus is looking at existing media types, existing advertising that brands are already investing in heavily, because there's a lot of eyes on, you know, traditional 2D advertising, and look at how we can bring a natural extension of that into VR and creating something that brings an added benefit to immersive experience, which is obviously a large portion of xyrobe, which is the multi-sensory aspects of it. So yeah.
Incredible. I had the privilege of trying one of your first experiences, and I can attest to that multi-sensory side and aspect of living through an experience, and not only watching an experience, but truly living through it. And I think that's something that's just invaluable when we're talking about stories and dreams. So incredible. How did you, that time where we met, you were pitching left and right to everywhere. How did you do that? How did you get that traction, get all those meetings in with no precedent of this technology out there before? So little experience from luxury brands with this type of technology and VR at the time. What were your learnings, and what can you share with us that can enlighten us on how to bring this up for other startups?
I mean, I think how we did, to be honest, the logistics of the roadshow with Chanel, but also with every other brand that we were working on trying to build a relationship with, was really just, it comes down to just saying yes to whenever they need you to be available, whether that's in New York or Paris or wherever it is. And, you know, that's really about scraping the 2 pennies that you've got together and jumping on a train, or, you know, getting yourself somewhere and sleeping on a friend's floor if needs be, to make sure you're at the meeting on time. And there's a lot of things that go into obviously running a startup, and I'm sure everyone who's set up a business can attest to that, kind of like the beginning phases of just needing to continue going. And I think that a large portion of the traction came down to being able to communicate that simplicity of the vision. I think that it was really easy to kind of show people the visual in the headset, which we had to do at the beginning without the multi-sensory elements. I actually think that when we met, Carlota, we didn't even have the first xyrobe pod built. I believe that it was still just an image on a screen that I was going around showing everyone. And then I finally managed to get you in once we'd been able to build one. Yeah. And I think that for us, it was about honing in on what was the biggest problem that a lot of brands were facing about engaging with VR in particular. And we found that from conversations through just literally cold emailing people with a compelling deck that we poured a lot of time, energy, and attention into. And I think we started out the business actually just being more of a fact-finding mission than anything else. We actually went out and started speaking to brands about what they were finding difficult about engaging with this kind of media. And I think that we understood that the biggest thing, that I think the misconception we felt, was that the quality or the kind of content that you needed to produce in VR didn't necessarily align with their vision of luxury or how they wanted to present themselves as a brand. And that often came down to the fact that they were considering real-time VR, which obviously has a huge amount of benefits to it. Obviously, all of the personalization, everything we're talking about with Roblox and things like that. There's a whole world out there with real-time VR, which is a very different world to where we like to play in. And I think that when we were showing them how you can experience movies, essentially immersive stereo rendered films in VR, that meant that the quality of what they were looking at felt considerably better in their eyes, because we're not having to deal with real-time graphics, meant that we could go and try and get as many meetings as possible. You know, we went to you guys, we came to wherever we need to be with a headset in tow, to show the kinds of graphics that we're talking about, the sort of media. When we're talking about VR media, this is what we mean. And I think as soon as we were able to illustrate that and share that with the brands, it sort of all started to click. And then from that point, it was then about finessing the model and how we were going to really operate as a business, which is no mean feat. You know, when we're working with very, very established brands, and not just one, you know, we're talking about all of the brands in luxury being actually very established and needing there to be a way of working that meant that we could work alongside you naturally and enable brands to consistently, you know, keep coming back to experience this kind of thing and not treat it as a one-off experience. It came down to a lot of trial and error, a lot of conversations, a lot of asking the questions that we needed to ask, and not being afraid of the answer not actually being what you thought, and then readdressing what you were ultimately doing. I think there's a lot of reinvention that needs to happen, at least at the beginning stages, and actually continuously, probably throughout the lifespan of any business. But it came down to nailing what the exact problem was that we felt was the biggest thing that most of the brands, or the majority of the brands, were feeling and facing, and then going out into the market and exploring whether that was the thing and trying to validate it. And that's what we did.
Amazing. Resilience, cold calling, doing what you need to do.
Horrible.
And really understanding your client.
Right. Yeah.
And being humble enough to understand that sometimes you have to pivot. So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, wise words, because you are one of the finalists now. How does it feel to be one of the finalists at the LVMH awards for La Maison de Startup?
Yes, it's amazing. It's incredible. I mean, it was only, I think it was 2 years ago that I went to VivaTech. I was actually there to do one of these mad pitches with the headset outside VivaTech. I'd planned to meet someone from a brand who was at VivaTech, and she'd given me 15 minutes of her time. And so I met her. I was planning to meet her outside of VivaTech before I quickly realized I couldn't put a headset on her in the middle of the road. So I had to buy a ticket. And, you know, I didn't have enough money at the time. So I ended up asking the guy very kindly at the front desk if he could let me in for half an hour. And he did by some miracle. And so I stood by one of the food stands in the front of VivaTech and pitched to one of these brands, which is one of the brands that we work with now. I had an opportunity, and I think it's very weird because I obviously went up to the LVMH booth because I said, well, I'm here now, I might as well make the most of it and see if I can glean any more networking or any more introductions. And I remember going into the LVMH. It was pretty good. It's a circular moment because we're here now, and it's just phenomenal. I mean, I'm so proud of the team and where we've come from and where we are now. I'm absolutely thrilled, and I can't wait to show. We're very lucky. We're going to have the xyrobe pod actually at the event, so I'm super excited. So anyone who's actually at VivaTech, please come and see us. We're right next to the LVMH booth at F47. So come and meet us. Come meet me. I'd love to meet you.
Don't miss out. Lastly, really quickly, tell us about your collaboration with Harrods and an immersive cinema, please. We're so excited about this.
Yeah, we're excited too. I think Harrods is a phenomenal brand. Obviously, they're a massive pioneer of lots of things. They're very well established as a business as well. And I think that when we were considering when we were going to bring xyrobe and start talking about real established retailing and how we were going to bring immersive media experience, advertising, marketing, all of the above, to places where there's a huge portion of the kinds of customers that a lot of these brands want to speak to. Harrods was obviously the number one place that we could really think of. And I think that Harrods and the opportunity, so we're building a 20-person multi-sensory VR cinema in Harrods. It's going to exist there hopefully indefinitely, and we're going to kind of put on a rolling array of brand experiences as a nice kind of addition to their existing portfolio of pop-up opportunities in the store. So obviously this presents its first real foray into this kind of immersive media, especially with VR on this kind of scale. And it offers brands the opportunity to obviously create kind of physical experience as well as engage with the virtual reality experience, which will act as a kind of extension to that. So I'm really, really excited. Obviously, I can't say too much about, because we haven't actually announced who the first brand is, but I think it's coming very soon. So yes, I've been wrapped on the wrist about what I can and can't say, but we're very excited. We can't wait to welcome people next month. I believe I'm allowed to say that. I think it's opening in June.
Well, thank you so much. Well, don't miss out on the Harrods Immersive Cinema and in VivaTech, your booth. Remind us your booth again.
F47, I think.
There you go. You won't miss it either. It's a big thing.
I'm definitely looking forward to that VR experience as well, Nell. So I will definitely be there when you open in. And then just moving on a little bit to Blake. Blake, obviously we met when I was part of the Farfetch Accelerator, the first one. And we did 2 cohorts of that together. And you've recently wrapped Futureverse. Can you tell us a little bit more about the startups that sort of came through the Futureverse Accelerator, and what? Of course, we've gone into the key trends, but maybe just a little bit more on the whole virtual worlds with the interoperability of where that is all going as well.
It would be my pleasure. So I'm going to talk about the Futureverse program, and later I would also like to compliment Nell and xyrobe, because I think it ties nicely to all the points we've made before. So Outlier Ventures has been an early supporter of Futureverse from years before, because what connected us together is this view on virtual worlds and their openness, that we believe that the idea of an open metaverse or open autonomous worlds, it's not about different scattered spaces that are not connected to one another. It's about one interconnected space that also would tie to physical experiences and spaces, and the user's ability to move freely between different corners of those spaces that can look different and have different dynamics, but essentially one uniform environment. And I believe we're slowly moving in that direction. So throughout the program, we've been working with Futureverse. They are an amazing partner. And right now, with their huge announcement of open the game gaming environment built on the ideas of Ready Player One, which in many ways informed the mass perception. And they have such an ambitious plan that they needed to find super capable builders, both on terms of protocol infrastructure, social data, all the way to using AI, because they have their own AI protocol called Altered State Machine, and the use of generative AI in those virtual worlds, as well as content and user-facing experiences in gaming. So we've selected 7 amazing teams, world-class founders, each one of them kind of belonging to a very different place in that roadmap, but all united behind this shared vision of this one open environment and facilitating different elements of it, of course, integrating the amazing Futureverse technology stack that was already out there and supported by great mentors like yourself. So before maybe talking a bit more about interoperability, I just want to compliment Nell, because I think xyrobe not only represents a great crossover between community and immersive experience, but also highlights a very important need, and that is the need for reinventing content. So we live in a world when we all know everything is content pretty much, and everybody to an extent must be a content creator, and brands are not exempt from that rule. But working on that also means we need to keep reinventing the ways we deliver content, and also reinvent the types of content. With the advent of virtual reality and spatial internet, those possibilities become very scalable. So that's another aspect of it. How do you drive scalability of content creation and user-generated content? And I think the news you brought up, Carlota, about the AI influencers is one of the approaches to creating that content at scale and making sure when the brand invests in a content piece, this content actually grows unproportionally to the original investment. And I think what also is a great link between Nell and xyrobe, as well between Roblox and their Walmart experience, it's 2 approaches to the same thing we kind of mentioned in the beginning. So one aspect of it is that now you're linking digital and virtual to physical retail locations, essentially making that transition for a brand from a marketing activity to something that translates into real retail sales. Whereas the Roblox activation, it takes a very different approach to the same problem, essentially by driving sales through virtual commerce. The next iteration of e-commerce will be throughout the gaming worlds and those immersive experiences as seamless as possible. So now, having made that point, I'm also going to add that in Chat GPT 4.0, O stands for Omni, which also gives me a lot to think about all of those different paradigms of interacting and engagement with the customer. So to go maybe deeper into the interoperability, if we want to achieve this huge immersive environment which encapsulates all of the aspects, I encourage the users to no longer think about objects as simply physical or digital. And I'm really pushing this kind of concept of a reality spectrum, that rather than think about it in binary terms, think about it as a spectrum of reality that we experience as users or as commercial customers, all the way from a physical object coming across to augmented reality through filters, mixed reality through spatial internet, to virtual commerce and e-commerce, all the way to VR. And I envision one day we'll be in a world when users can move across all of those platforms and contexts seamlessly along with their assets. But of course, that brings a whole set of challenges. One of them is just simply asset compatibility. And this is a non-trivial challenge because every of those worlds has its own requirements, needs quality testing and quality assurance. But with the rise of AI and helping automate many aspects of that process, I believe we're getting closer and closer to the solution. And Nell made a very important point about giving brands this confidence about how their brand IP is being represented in those experiences. And I think it's very important to give brands a sense of control and comfort that they can pull the plug on something that they wouldn't think aligns with their brand ethos, with their brand identity, but at the same time double down on what they think really kind of resonates with the brand storytelling. So finally, at its roots, with so many actors in the market, the problem of interoperability is not chiefly a technical problem. It's a problem of alignment of economic incentives and aligning all the market participants as one community to show them that it's a win-win game for everybody and giving them a commercial reason to push for that interoperability. And then users will follow, because in the end of the day, the desire of motion between those worlds comes from the user. And if you have a digital wearable or a physical object with a digital representation or a product passport, if you don't have anywhere to showcase that object, well, fashion and luxury doesn't happen in the vacuum. It happens in a social context. So I always make that comparison of sending you a gift. It's a Christian Dior dress. It's beautiful. But I also send you a contract that you can only wear it in your bathroom. So then suddenly that dress loses most of its value. But if we have real interoperability, that automatically drives up the utility of those assets through the roof and represents a great opportunity for brands. That was a long one.
And very distinct as well, actually.
I was going to say, no, I was just going to add to what Blake was saying, which I found really fascinating. But I think the concept of interoperability within media is actually a really fascinating concept, because I think so often people think about just physical assets or digital assets and how, wearables in particular are interoperable between different platforms. But actually, I think that your point you made around the interoperability of media within the existing mechanisms that we already know, i.e. a brand is investing a huge amount of money into an existing piece of creative content that's going to live through stills and TV spots or YouTube spots, how we can utilize that kind of conversion into different media types, whether that's real-time VR, whether that's AR, whether that's pre-rendered VR, is a really fascinating concept. And it's all about aligning, like you said, the revenue streams, because ultimately, if they're going to establish change and continue to fund change, then it needs to ultimately come from a single source, i.e. they're not needing to assign new budget to a different R&D pot. So no, I thought that was really interesting. I might borrow that.
Please go ahead.
Just maybe build on from that, Nell, do you think that with generative AI and with where how quickly that's just even disrupting the creation of content, and also I think the sort of conversion of that 2D into 3D, that's just going to be a lot easier in some sense to be able to live across all those different platforms and make it so much more interoperable. Is that something you see yourself integrating into the way that you produce content for the brands that's at xyrobe?
Yeah, I think so. I think that at xyrobe, our main kind of business is less about the actual content itself. It's much more around providing an amazing distribution space and the ability to offer brands this kind of turnkey into the actual solution itself on how their customers are experiencing it. I think that AI presents a really interesting opportunity to allow brands to delve into creating different versions or variations of existing media, and it's absolutely something we're interested in and actively exploring. I think that there's always going to be things that will mean that brands will start engaging with how they communicate through VR or any of these other means slightly differently, because they're typically used to being able to storytell in this way, i.e. through a 2D screen, which offers a different set of tools to when you're storytelling in VR. And I think that for the time being, whilst the majority of the customers or the distribution network, you know, the most amount of money is going to go to where the most amount of distribution is and how many people are going to ultimately see it, or how many people of value to that brand are ultimately going to see it. And I think whilst that's still the case, I think there's a very, very real use case for utilizing things that can make that process a lot more efficient, or less kind of all this stuff about, you know, asking a brand to create a whole new set of money for something that feels like it's R&D still at this point. I think that there's definitely something really interesting in there in terms of its actual functionality and how brilliant it is. It's still to be seen. I know that it's still something that is going to be worked on to try and deliver something that's more cost effective and more time efficient, which is the main two things that I think AI can offer someone like that. But in terms of being able to utilize AI to take something from 2D to 3D, I know that that's a very real possibility and is definitely something that I think is worthwhile exploring until we have mad distribution networks where everyone's wearing VR headsets, and that's something that brands can engage with.
Yeah, sure. And then Blake, I just, you know, I know I'm going to see you, lucky enough to see you this week in Paris, but also next week for NFC Lisbon, which I'm a personal huge fan of, and you'll be joining us on a panel there as well. But is there, you know, I would love to sort of know if there was anything that you have perhaps like singled out in terms of what you're expecting coming both to VivaTech, you know, any of the other startups that are on your radar that you would want to maybe just, you know, talk about a little bit, and then also NFC Lisbon and talk about the panel that you will be moderating for us at Future Plus.
That sounds amazing. So when it comes to VivaTech, I think the French ecosystem has always been at the forefront of brand adoption, which I find really interesting. VivaTech not being maybe a key Web3 event like NFC Lisbon is, but definitely being a key event for brands. I'm looking to, first of all, reconnect with all of my friends in the French ecosystem that represent what we tend to refer to as Web3 French mafia. And not because there is any murky collusions there, but because they support each other and everybody collaborates. And I always point it as an example to other ecosystems that they should take example from the French founders and how they support one another. So, of course, we have not really a startup anymore, more like a massive scale-up, but we have the amazing Sandbox, which is at the core of this ecosystem. But we also have our amazing friends from the team Metaverse, which is very focused on virtual assets and immersive experiences. We have our friends from Absolute Labs, which I believe were one of the winners of last year's VivaTech. And, of course, we have Zili, which is an amazing, amazing platform for community tech. But what I also want to see from the brand perspective, I want to see them embracing certain opportunities that the technology brings, such as co-creation, how we can create that, again, within the parameters of brand aesthetics, and how we can bring that to the next level, how they reinvent community tooling and start taking ownership away from those dominating social media platforms, different approaches to CRMs, which I believe Absolute Labs was a great example of, as well as pushing more database engagement, including, we spoke a lot about AI here, and with the right type of data and the data collection, AI enables a brand to get to absolutely unthought of levels of personalization in the engagement, as well as in any commercial experience interaction with the user. So AI personalization is very important. And of course, after those initial brand efforts that we've seen in the space, how do they double down on rewards and loyalty, which I think, especially in fashion, that's a really area for me that I'm passionate about. When it comes to NFC Lisbon, I think that's a very interesting event because it shines the light into a very interesting corner of Web3 that focuses on gaming mechanics as well. Sometimes meme coins, which we don't really endorse that hard. This is, of course, my personal opinion, not OV's, because sometimes they don't build on strong fundamentals. But an interesting thing that meme coins do in my eyes, away from the speculation aspect, is they crystallize communities and kind of have communities rally behind them. And those people influence the direction of those projects and take them into different places. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of it. So when I'm going to be at NFC Lisbon, I'm really looking forward to talking to builders that are working on adding utility to digital assets, to NFTs, to digital assets in gaming, that are trying to enrich the digital backend and working on the technology we might not see with a naked eye, but is powering that transition into user immersion into virtual, into the reality spectrum, which also means people working on augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality platforms, gamifying the experience in a very creative way. And of course, we're talking about those avatars, but I'm chiefly interested in how those avatars and their assets move around. So infrastructure for digital self, and of course, my core passion, which is interoperability. So in NFC Lisbon, in our amazing panel, we're going to be talking about digital couture and pushing boundaries in the digital space. So how do you redefine the concept of couture in the digital realm? Do some concepts translate? Do some of them need to be reinvented? And I think we have an amazing kind of selection of panelists to help usher that dialogue. But I don't want to reveal too much because I want to keep you at the edge of your seat and tune into the live stream or come see us in Lisbon.
Yes, great. And actually just something also about NFC Lisbon, because obviously our role at Future Plus is also to be facilitating those bridges between where the traditional brands are and helping them, connect with what's happening across a very, very rapidly evolving technology landscape, as well as connecting with digitally native brands and creators, as well as tech founders, and vice versa. I think, the digitally native brands and creators and tech founders want to, have those amazing use cases with the more traditional brands. And conferences and events like NFC Lisbon really kind of shine a light on what's happening across culture. And I think that is such an important, it's so important for brands to really tap into that, to really understand, where the trends are, who is really kind of like pushing the boundaries when it comes to art or fashion or and how that sort of converges with what's happening across culture. So I think that's why we are actually bringing together and have invited a couple of brands like Lanvin, the Lanvin Group, head of innovation will be coming with us, as well as MF Brands and Lacoste and a few others. So we're really excited for that. But yeah, just to sort of wrap up, this has been super exciting and very insightful. Definitely looking forward to Paris and then Lisbon as well. And yeah, if there's any closing words, if anyone wants to add to anything that we've already talked about.
I just want to say it's incredible, Blake, the way that you connect dots, man. Wow. It's like there's dots from an hour prior that he's collecting in his head and then boom, creates an amazing mosaic. Thank you for wrapping that up so well and so swiftly in what you're thinking of where the future is pushing for this. So super excited to hear you at NFC, to be at NFC, to see what amazing things will come from xyrobe at VivaTech. And thank you so much, Ashumi, for having me as a co-host.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all our guests who joined. We have a couple of comments. No one's really left any questions, but we will be sharing this recording, so you could share it as well after we're done. And then if anyone else is going to be sharing, there will be comments at the bottom of this that you could also, of course, answer directly. Thank you again so much for joining me, and looking forward to more soon.
Thank you so much.
It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Likewise.